All right. Before we get started, I'm going to tell the joke I told the room before you. You're very lucky. So a woman's kayaking off the coast of Maine, and she disappears. Everyone expects the worst, and a few days later, the worst is indeed confirmed. The harbor master shows up at her house. Her husband's there. He goes, I got some bad news for you, but I got some good news. I got some great news. Husband goes, what could possibly, well, tell me, what is this? Well, unfortunately, we found your wife, and she didn't make it. Husband's devastated, of course. But the harbor master goes, but when we pulled her up, she had 12 of the best lobster we'd seen in years clinging to her. And as the husband, you're entitled to half the catch. And the husband's horrified, of course. He goes, what could possibly be the great news? And the harbor master goes, we're pulling her up again tomorrow. All right. It's late in the afternoon, guys. You know, we want to make sure that we start everyone with a little bit of energy in this final session before margaritas and armadillos. So it's a pleasure to welcome this session, Data Everywhere. If anyone knows where that line came from, there was an old poem, The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, where the line was, water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. And years ago, I had a data analyst on my team who used to say, data everywhere and not a drop to think. And as data has become more and more important, how we think about data is also more and more important. And these guys all are been thinking about data quite a bit. So let's kick in with some of the questions. Maybe we start off, and any of you feel free to well, first of all, let me introduce the panel. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and let us know who you are, what you do.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Çetin Karakuş. Run the quantitative analytical solutions at BP. My background's in the derivative technology. I run quant technology, building quantitative and quantamental system for derivatives trading in energy markets.
I'm Scott Feldman. Scott Feldman from VoxSmart. A long history in the post-trade processing infrastructure space. Currently now at VoxSmart, working on surveillance products and data aggregation, data insights, and COO of North America.
I'm Dennis Carlson. I'm VP of Security and Operations for Molecule Software, but I have 20 years of experience in data management and analytics supporting the commodity space. I've built reporting and analytic solutions kind of front to back throughout the commodity life cycle.
Great. Well, thank you, folks. And we start off with the first question, just about general trends. What are some of the big trends we're seeing in data and digitalization? Let's start with you.
Well, I mean, as you said, data is kind of increasing. So because there are so many different ways of now capturing data. With the digitalization, you have like sensor data, you have other, the means which weren't available in the past. Now you're having all streams of data coming. At the same time, the storage price is also going down with the, using cloud, scalable infrastructure. So there's no problem with actually having the raw data. The real issue is making sense of it in a kind of a more I would say more kind of integrated sense, because like the holy grail of the systems will be like you have one system, everything is there, everything kind of integrated with each other. So you kind of you access that system to draw whatever insights you want. But in reality, this couldn't be further from truth. You will always have some sort of a heterogeneous infrastructure, different systems, because of the business. Like evolutions of the business or how things are being done. So this kind of a distributed, heterogeneous infrastructure is kind of a reality, and then that kind of poses a big challenges in terms of the having this kind of a whole coherent, integrated view. And I think that's the kind of the main challenge. So we're trying to build systems. You try to kind of literally build kind of the systems where everything is at the same time constantly changing and evolving. at a increasingly higher pace. I think that I will say that's the main challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing similar challenges with our clients. The number of sources of data continues to expand, and that brings challenges around standardization and normalization. Those are actually the easier challenges to solve. What we're seeing and some of the platforms we start to work with are around distilling down that information, right? So clients are to some degree drowning in data, right? And they're aggregating, like you said, the sources keep expanding. It's cheap to store the data so you can keep it around for longer, but it's then distilling down to kind of mining for gold, right? How do we extrapolate out of all of that data the key insights that are important to deliver that on? So those are some of the challenges that we see with our clients. It could be trading data, it could be research and market data, it could be annotating sales calls and storing them in a CRM system. But gaining insights, but providing tools for the clients to gain insights into that data is kind of the key space we're trying to operate in right now.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that, or?
Yeah, so not to repeat a theme, I think what these two guys have said is absolutely right. There are persistent challenges in how to turn your data into valuable information. And it's becoming even more challenging in a complex data environment as more data points are available to us. I think one of the opportunities we have in the technology landscape is you're starting to see better technology on the integration side. It's more accessible, it's more affordable, and you're starting to see a push towards the business where tools are available to solve the semantic layer challenge, and we can enable business analysts, front office, back office, mid office, to really work with the data versus trying to bring that data together, figure out what it means, put sense to it.
Great. Well, thank you. Scott, you mentioned trading data, and I think that's what I think a lot of the people at this conference are really interested in particular. How is data currently being used in the trade life cycle? I guess where are the gaps or the breaks in the process that you guys think need to be addressed?
I can take that one, absolutely. So one of the things we're seeing is the kind of inflection between trading data and communications around that trading data. And how do we link these two together? The problem has always historically been with trading data is the second it's stored somewhere, it's, from the life cycle of the trade, it's technically stale, right? Because more activity continues to happen. So creating that immutable record, I don't want to talk, distributed ledger, blockchain, whatever technology may be, but that persistent data that is stored and continually enriched and validated, reducing the number of reconciliation and touch points that need to manually be done with that data is a key trend that it's definitely brought to our attention. But one of the interesting things we're doing with trade data right now is forensic reconstruction of transactions and the history of that transaction. So being able to take a trade that's been executed and done and potentially even cleared at the request of a regulator to take a forensic look at the history of that transaction, all of the life cycle events that have happened, trade events, trade surveillance events, communications, whether they're chats, calls, and link that all back together in a programmatic way gives you that full auditable view of that transaction and its full life cycle.
Any other comments to add to that, or? Yep.
I think when I look at it from system point of view, we have a lot of infrastructure around once the trade capture, and then deal life cycle, like whether it's it's an option, if it's an exercise, or notified, or if it's a dividend. I think there's lots of systems, but there is a kind of a gap pre-trade. Like how did you actually decide to make the trade? That's kind of linked to the both analytics and also all the supporting systems where, for example, if you're in a physical oil, commodity markets, energy markets, there's a lot of information you use to actually make the trade decisions. And that comes from the various systems. So that you can't really I mean, there aren't really kind of generic solutions for that because it's very much specific to the different businesses, and also it's very valuable and proprietary. So, like, you know, no company will want to share that. But most of the information is actually there. So once kind of trade captured, we have, like, you know, lots of systems where, you know, we keep track of the mere act of capturing deal is, you know, turned that into a kind of a more standard form. And most of the transactions are anyway now these days happening on the exchanges. So there's a lot of information there, but the pre-trade part is where the, you know, I think there's a kind of most of the gaps are, yeah.
A quick question for you, while we're on the panel. I mean, is it around communications that lead up to that trade, or analytics, or research? Because what we're seeing some of our customers and clients are asking us for is to be able to link that transaction back to all of the chats and phone calls and emails and
Yeah.
you know, so that's something we're looking to solve for. We're kind of in progress, and, you know, in the commodity space and the fixed income space across multiple desks that some of the tier ones we're working with.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how the business works, right? So how you decided that trade requires, we create a lot of pre-trade analytics tools where traders use to, you know, gauge the market, you know, to understand like what strategy might work. There's lots of tools. Obviously, they communicate with each other. They are in communication with the brokers and other market participants. So capturing all that in one system would be like a holy grail. If you do that, that's like, I think that's good. That's like an end result of any analytics system. So the better you do that, the more successful you will be because you will make really good trading decisions. And that's kind of a, you know, kind of a constant goal for us to how we can, you know, make it more coherent. I mean, even successful trading firms, I think that, you know, they don't have one system. It's just like very hard to capture all of that. But, you know, it's a noble goal to try to do that.
Can I ask a question here?
Certainly.
How do you capture the traders' chats? Also private?
Well, voice or typing chats?
Whatever. I know traders' chats, right? So traders' chats through different channels.
I know Scott will want to weigh in on that one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a whole business model, right? So if you're talking about the standard chat platforms like Bloomberg or ICE Chat, we take feeds from them, from ICE, from Bloomberg, you know, at the permission of the firm themselves who wants to analyze that data, either from a surveillance perspective, from a front office trading perspective, we're looking at missed opportunities, we're looking at client coverage matrix, we're looking at product mentions. So our tool set, I don't want to, you know, this is a bit of a plug here, but our tool set allows for the normalization or standardization of that data income, right? So we take all of that unstructured chat data, all of that unstructured, the holy grail of unstructured data is voice, right? So we take voice data, we transcribe it, we run it through our NLP engine, which identifies intents, name entity recognition, sentiment, and polarity, and can feed that data onto another platform. Tableau dashboard, could be a click dashboard, could be a quoting engine. Any of those types of functions are add-ons to what we do with that data. What we like to do is enable the normalization process to happen for all the different streams using the same modular engines that are geared towards commodities trading, fixed income trading, that specific models for that.
Thanks.
Did you have any thoughts on that? How BP looks at some of this information, or?
I mean, I can't get into too much details, but we use some third-party products. The voice capture is, I mean, capturing the text chat is the easiest thing, right? So it's literally you put some, you know, interceptor layer, whatever you type, you know, goes into the chat distribution engine, just get logs. So that's kind of the easiest thing. The voice is a bit more challenging because, I mean, it's kind of a, you know, it requires a lot more data to capture it. But, you know, we have systems to do that. And the main challenge is obviously to kind of examine those records because it's kind of a manually intensive process. So someone has to actually listen to tapes. But as Scott mentioned now, we have a kind of new systems where it kind of a real-time NLP-based kind of voice-to-text conversions taking place. So once you converted the voice into kind of a textual transcript, then you can use the various, like you could do kind of a keyword search, or like do other text-based processing, so that it make it much more easier. And I think the kind of goal is like almost do real-time monitoring. Obviously, when there's an issue, there's a trade dispute, or there's some sort of a compliance, let's say complaint or whatever being raised, you can go and check the tapes. You can find out after the fact. But the idea is like whether you can do kind of a real-time monitoring, and when you notice something, where you can just immediately notify someone from compliance to take or maybe trading manager to go and take an action. So that's I think where we kind of going with the developments in the technology.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would add that as the cloud kind of evolves and becomes more accessible and more secure, you're finding more and more sophisticated offerings in that space in general, and I think they're becoming more accessible as we go. Scott doesn't want to necessarily have me say this, I guess, but there's an interesting evolution of natural language processing going on that I think is going to be very compelling for the commodity space. And I agree with Satan, right? Getting to that point where you can actually capture a trade as it's articulated is particularly compelling. And one of the big drivers is, again, the regulatory demand, and as quickly as you can identifying and even checking that the trade that is actually executed is what was agreed.
Great. One of the earliest things we said in this panel was about adding value, right? And it's one thing to say, hey, we collect information because it maybe because we have to, maybe because it might protect us, or maybe because it's just good to do. But what are some of the challenges in bringing data together across a trading organization in a way that brings substantial value?
Yeah, I guess when you think about the value, it's like revenue minus cost, right? So either you have to increase the revenues, profits, or revenues, or you have to reduce the cost. So then when you delve into it, there's kind of a various type of things. Like, I guess as a trading organization, you're mainly focused on always the revenue side. But in a big organization, you have the risk, operations, some other functions which have to support the trading. They mainly focus on the cost side. When I say cost, that also includes obviously compliance, regulatory, legal exposure. So that's also cost, right? If things goes wrong, so they kind of focus on that. On the revenue generation side, it's the idea is like how can you put profitable trades in a kind of a consistent, high volume way. And yeah, data adds a lot of value. So without data, we'll be like flying blind, right? You need all these gauges, all the data coming, so you kind of make your assessment. So how you put, how you gauge the market, and how you put new strategies, and how you kind of change your hedge positions. All that depends on data. And it's very kind of important, especially in the commodity markets, which are very physically driven, right? It's like based on ultimately supply-demand factors, and we have like tens of thousands of different commodities and hundreds of thousands of different markets, like different specific locations. So if you kind of do this well, then you could literally kind of turn all the discrepancies between different locations into kind of a very profitable physical arbitrage business. So you don't really need to know exactly what's going to happen in a specific commodity, as long as you know that how they kind of compare from one location to another. It becomes like a business, really. You just take something, store it, transport it, and then sell it in another location, and do this, day after day. So that's only possible if you have the systems, infrastructure, data to allow you to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think what we're seeing businesses demand of commodity data is, in particular, upstream, and we've touched on this a little bit, right? That being able to model markets is compelling when it comes to identifying immediate and future opportunities. And I think as we solve the problem of conformance of data, which exists everywhere, mind you, and it's not a trivial problem. But if you're able to solve that even within your own business, you're then able to run those analytics that tell you, are your traders actually performing in the way you expect them to perform? Have you missed opportunities? Have you met regulatory requirements? And you can do that dynamically. One interesting conversation that's out there is with the rise and democratization of artificial intelligence, I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see that move from more an academic pursuit to a value-added pursuit. And you can even start identifying and suggesting opportunities either for trading, for scheduling, by ingesting that volume of data and applying certain metrics and analytics against it that can actually prompt your traders or your schedulers to opportunities. And I don't think we ever take the human out of it, right? These people are professionals for a reason, and you all have experience. But I do think as humans we miss opportunities that systems can help identify throughout the business day.
Yeah, just one thing to add there, and you said keywords there, which is missed opportunities, which is what we hear frequently, right? Because traders talk to a client, and then the phone rings, and picks it up, and something else, and then all of a sudden, whatever that trade was that was looking, or she was looking at, that's kind of put off to the side. I think one thing that's important to understand is the timeliness of data is paramount to extrapolating the most value out of these products, right? So there's a 800-pound gorilla in the chat space that doesn't get data to the end of the day, right? And so the timeliness of that data is very difficult. Right? You can't extrapolate a missed trading opportunity if I don't get to see that data until the next morning, right? Things like that. So voice, so we can get access to voice chat, voice conversation, real time. We've got the ability, a lot of service providers have the ability to do real-time transcription, provide the NLP services on top, but we've got really actionable items that come out of this. So the missed opportunity is presented to your desktop in a dashboard minutes after it potentially happened, right? So that's a visual cue for the trader to say, I've still got a trade to book, or I've still got a quote to provide, or I've still got a confirmation to look for, and that's the opportunity we're trying to present to them.
Wonderful. By the way, anybody who feels like jumping in with a question, we're a nice intimate group here. Here we go, one back here.
You know, your comment about pre-trading, that actually really resonated with me. Like, you know, every time a trader makes a decision, I'm not necessarily, of course I'm interested in whether we generate P&L, but I'm more interested in why did you make that trade? Like, what was your, like, technical analysis or fundamental views, or, like, did you have some intuition? Did you think there was some outliers that you could monetize? I do that personally, right? I try to, like, whenever I make a trade, I try to make a note that, okay, this is the reason why I made a trade. But do you do that systematically at BP? Like, try to understand why traders make certain trades?
Well, I can't really comment on that, but I don't think so. I don't know the exact what all our traders are doing, but I'm not aware of any system which captures. And also, there's a bit of, I guess, what you see is the traders are being reluctant to share that information. But I think institutional would be a very useful thing to do, actually, if you could somehow enforce that. There are certain things, obviously, there are certain, based on the kind of the strategies they are using, you could somehow understand why certain trades being put in place. For example, if you're hedging, you know, if you're an option book and you might be like doing the delta hedging, right? So the reason why you did put those trades are pretty clear. But for some other things, it's like, I think the only thing you can find usually is like based on like what is this deal, which books are in it, like which strategy it belongs to. From there you can infer something, but I don't think the, you know, like done in a more systematic way.
Pre-trade, I mean, were you talking about, like, being compliant, like, you know, having all the voicemail, for example, you guys mentioned?
Yeah.
Were you talking about that, or what other things were you?
No, I was just talking more commercial. Obviously, like compliance is very important. So, like for example, before the trades, you might have some chat communication with the brokers and other market participants. It's very important the sort of language you're using, right? So we have that's the part which are very much heavily monitored. So if you like, you know, that there's kind of a market regulation. You can't be in collusion with other participant, for example, to kind of push the prices or like to manipulate the markets. So, but that's kind of very much heavily monitored. I was talking more about the commercial, or what was the commercial directives, or why you kind of taking these positions, etc. That's kind of, I think, complex process. The problem is, I think, is with the capturing that is it's a very complex process, right? You might be getting some information from your system. You talk with your analysts. They have some views around how the markets are moving, and you look at maybe the market action, the market data, what's happening in the market, and then you have your own maybe intuition, and then you put it. So capturing all this into kind of a more digestible form, I think it's kind of a bit difficult, but whatever you could do in that sense would be quite useful to do a kind of a post-mortems and analysis.
I mean, you're queuing stuff really easy for me here. So this is essentially what one of our tools does, right? And I don't want to make this too much of a box smart plug, but the trade reconstruction tool we have creates a timeline view of all of the communications, transactions, and the post-trade, all the pre-trade, right? So if you were to overlay on top of our pre-trade, trade, post-trade timeline some of the analytics that your traders were using, right? So maybe there's a new data came out, right? And then all of a sudden you see a spike in a particular commodity, a particular asset class, particular fixed income interest, or whatever it may be. You can interlace that on top of the trade life cycle that we've now mapped out for you to kind of understand how are your traders interpreting the data that your research department is putting out. Changes, the Fed comes out and speaks about something, it makes a big rate change, whatever it may be. From that point on, you can overlay that kind of transaction history and the communications that lead up to it to identify how that information is being interpreted. No more plug for
There's a question back there. Yep.
Yeah, hi. So we are seeing data everywhere, but it's really hard to reconstruct from start to end and get the actual insight, draw that and find opportunity or missed opportunity. So what are the pieces that we are missing in the normal cycle that's preventing us from getting to that level?
I mean, yeah, it's good questions. I mean, the thing is with the data, like you could capture as much as you want, right? Like for example, like if you look at our bodies, we could capture trillions of data points, but just having that data suddenly not going to make you understand how all the metabolic processes and how the medicine works, right? That requires its own research. I think the problem is we are capturing data, but just capturing is not going to give you the insight. So you need to have a kind of a more fundamental approach. Like you need to understand your business. You need to have a way to model the data. I mean, my personal opinion is like you need to have. So the integration is a key thing because the data are going to be coming from the different operational business systems, and that's the reality. So you're not going to have like, oh yeah, I'm going to deal with one systems. I mean, Scott, for example, talking about his product, so we have like other vendors coming with the different systems. Great product, but there will be another product, there will be another system. There will always data coming from different parts of the organization. So being able to interrelate those data, that's where you see, get a big picture of what is happening, and that's what gives you insight. And that's only possible if you do that in a kind of a more bottom-up approach where, for example, you have some sort of a enterprise data dictionary where you have to map out the concepts which drive your business, right? And then you link that to the various systems instead of doing the other way around. I have this system, how can I integrate them? That's become more like a patchwork. You just maybe flowing data from one side to another, but you don't really get fundamentally, you might generate a lot of reports and visualization, but you don't really get a lot of insights on what is happening. But if you have a more kind of a bottom-up ground approach where you kind of go from the principles and concepts and then say, okay, I have this system, but there might be data coming from this system, I can map to that. And that's not an easy solution, right? There's no quick fix for that. You can't just buy a vendor's product or put some servers on the AWS and suddenly you're not gonna, you need to have like a design this thing and get this completely adopted by your organization, and then have everyone to contribute that core system, because it's going to evolve. So it's not going to be like done and then we're going to use this for the rest of our lives. It's something constantly evolves. So none of these are easy things. It requires commitment and investment. I think that's why it doesn't happen very, very quickly.
So, a follow-up, is it the data pieces that are missing, or is it the people, or is it the business knowledge? What is the glue that brings it all together?
Yes. The money and tears that have been shed over data management. I think in reality it depends on the organization that you're dealing with, but it also depends on how the business is driving priority and what's important, right? And the technology is allowing us to get faster and more affordable in bringing data together and conforming it in a way that's really valuable, right? Your businesses are starting to realize their data is actually an asset. And organizations that think of their data as an asset have a lot of opportunity, because then it becomes something you want to invest in, right? The one biggest challenge in recent history has been just the cost of standing up servers, bringing in data, doing conformance, conforming master data across an organization, and so on. Again, there's the technologies that are evolving in the last 2-3 years really help compress that scale and cost, and can make things more active, right? So data lake is a concept that I think in the data world we say is maybe less than successful in and of itself, but the idea of bringing your data together quickly, analyzing what's available, and then starting to drive analytics and reporting from the business perspective is essential in my mind. And this is what we're hearing from our customers, right? So this conversation is a very similar theme across most of the organizations that Molecule works with, right? They want all of their data, not just their ETRM data. They want market data, they want middle office data, they want back office data, but they don't necessarily want to go out there and rebuild their entire infrastructure, right? So that creates those opportunities to bring that data together to extract that value. So I think again, the classic challenges of this are how do you put context to your data, right? You can talk to 2 different trading organizations and they use different words for different things. So there's even a lack of consistency across the vertical that we all live in. But solving that problem within an organization can also be very challenging. So contextualizing your data is key to understanding what you have. It's key to relating it across your systems and across your life cycle. And once you have that understood, you can then start doing all kinds of interesting things with your data. You can start doing the things that analysts want to do, right? Extracting value, building reports, running analytics, running models on top of it. I think it is still a challenge that organizations try to get to that result before their data is sufficiently contextualized and conformed, right? And thus the challenge of having this massive volume of data.
Yeah. I mean, I will add that I think there is a gap in terms of having technology to enable kind of a semantic integration and dynamic, life cycle of those semantic concepts to evolve. There's definitely, I think there's a gap in terms of technology. Like we have technology to store data, generate reports and visualization from different systems, but like integrating the kind of the various data from different places, there's kind of a technological gap. But there's also a big part of the being able to do that is organizational. So you need to open up the data to, assuming that you have such a system, then you have to open up to the whole organization, because data touches everyone. Like, it's everyone in the organization will be contributing to the data. So you need to have something like a Wikipedia type of model where everyone can contribute to it and it kind of evolves. So if you do that, then you're going to have a really kind of a holistic view of what's happening, and then
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is, as vendors in this space, be good corporate citizens, right? It's BP's data, right? If I need to interoperate with Molecule, let me interoperate, but we should be able to interoperate with each other in a seamless way that decreases the challenge that BP and those clients have, right? It's your data. Do you want to interoperate with our two systems together? So creating APIs and an ecosystem that allows for this to happen really is beneficial to the vendor community as well as the end client.
Is there any other questions from the floor before we move on? All right. Let's get, earlier you mentioned, capture something for compliance, right? What are some of the regulatory requirements right now that are driving some of the data storage and organizational framework for data?
I'm not that familiar with the specifics because I'm more focused on the front office, but I know that there are requirements about the position reporting after Dodd-Frank. There's more requirements around the exposure and your positions, so there's probably some drive over there. And what else could be? I mean, we deal with the customers and etc. as a part of the other onboarding processes. So we don't deal with just anybody. The customers has to be first kind of validated and kind of onboarded. So there's quite a bit of data capture on that side. And also, I think most of there's kind of a difference always between the kind of exchange traded deal flows and the OTC exchange part is pretty much kind of more safe, I guess, because you rely on the exchanges kind of being an intermediary. In OTC, it relies more on the essentially credit risk and we kind of having that customer knowledge. So there's probably kind of a reporting being done on that side.
I mean, there's definitely an angle to regulatory compliance that relates to communication surveillance and such, right? So from a trade surveillance perspective, the things you said are absolutely accurate, right? But from a compliance in the surveillance space, what we are seeing and is the desire to apply the same set of workflow and logic across all channels that come through, right? So what you can't do is limit your trade, or you can try, but it's a very complicated process to limit where a trader is allowed to communicate and how they're allowed to communicate. And they're going to go wherever their clients want them to communicate with them. So providing a compliant solution for them to communicate on these channels is an important thing, and aggregating the same spot. So whether the person picked up the phone or typed a message on WhatsApp or made a call from their mobile phone, you're at the same level of compliance regardless of the kind of input to that system.
Wonderful. Well, talk about the cloud. What are some of the advantages and features of cloud offerings, and how do they stack up against on-premise storage?
Yeah, I mean, what cloud provides is like, instead of, we used to have our big data centers where we had to manage the server farms, infrastructure. So instead of doing that now, we're using AWS or Azure or likes of such offerings. So it kind of, so you don't have to manage the physical infrastructure. And obviously that the people who have to manage that infrastructure, obviously you don't have to necessarily employ that many people to do that. And on top of that, it provides you some compute and storage elasticity or flexibility, so you can scale up. Whereas in the past, if you manage your own data center, then you need to have become like a logistical planning. So if you had to add new servers, you have to order that hardware, and ETA for that might be like 6 months. So you won't be able to scale it up before 6 months. Those servers coming. So that kind of gives you, so by outsourcing that to the cloud vendors, you have that kind of flexibility. But also, I think I see on kind of a financial side, it kind of essentially kind of turns into, it's a bit of a financial engineering, turns the capital investment into kind of a more kind of a cost. So that, I don't know, in short term, it might be more attractive for certain projects, but long term, obviously, that might have some implications. And then the whole modern software stack, I think, is kind of evolving toward the cloud now as well. So whatever you're getting, all the solutions are based on cloud. So it's like, even if you don't want to use the cloud-based solution, you probably have to end up creating like internal cloud, because the technology stacks are now kind of very much tuned for the cloud. I think overall it's kind of a positive development.
Yeah, to add to that a little bit, I think one of the things the cloud is providing for various size organizations is a relatively high level of data security. So it's a progressive concern that I think in the trading and commodity business, you want to make sure your data is secure. The people who trade with you want to make sure your data is secure. And the cloud allows access to security features that are cutting edge. That would be extremely expensive in some cases and prohibitive to do on-prem. The other thing that I think is great about the cloud when it comes to the commodity business is it allows you to be very agile. You are able to spin up infrastructure, has been said, relatively quickly. You can test platforms, you can test models, you can run analytics against your data as an experiment. And it's relatively low cost, low risk. And if it's not what you're looking for, you can shut that down and move on. And in an environment of volatility and an environment of changing marketplaces for any number of reasons, models need to change rapidly. Organizations want to test their positions. They want to test margin possibilities and outcomes, and the cloud allows you to do that at a pace that we've never had before on-prem. So I think the flexibility that the cloud brings is going to be progressively more valuable to the commodity trading space and organizations there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add there from a cost perspective is the auto scalability allows you to save money when your systems are under low volume and handle the capacity, almost without a ceiling. There's nothing worse than having a bunch of servers sitting there that aren't doing anything you've already paid for them, right? So the cloud gives you that opportunity to kind of pay for what you're using, right, with limited overhead, and it's definitely the flexibility to be able to deploy. Creating a cloud native solution that also is deployable on premise, like you mentioned, is something that we're all kind of in the vendor space dealing with, right? Because everyone's got their preferred flavor of cloud, whether it's GCP or AWS or clients that won't go in cloud at all. So we've got a solution that's available and deployable. We're using Docker container to be able to cover all of that situation.
I have an alarm clock that goes off every day just to make sure I'm still, alert. Sorry about that. So we have time for one more. Any questions before we last? There's one question back there.
So, Dennis, that was a good point. I think previously, you would bring data and you do the analysis, but now I feel like you do the analysis where the data resides. So you push the model towards where data is, but it seems like there's a little bit of friction, right? People are either uncomfortable, they think it's proprietary. How do you make that transition more seamless for customers in general?
So I don't think there's a single answer to that. I do think that the cloud offers flexibility in scale to bring data together. Now, we live in a space where there's always proprietary data, right? I see that breaking down somewhat because companies and entities, markets are starting to realize that data has value to the market and to their customers beyond just their own proprietary demands. But in some ways, that's part of the persistent problem of we don't really have a common shared language in commodity trading, right? We understand what a trade is, we understand what a commodity is, but across organizations and across vendors even, the way we capture that data can be very different, and that's part of the challenge. I think the tools that are dynamic semantic layers, and when I say that, I mean there are progressively better tools out there that are able to put the model into memory, right? So you no longer have to move all your data around, but you can actually build your semantic model, your conformance, in a memory layer, and then do your analytics and reporting off of that. Those have become much more sophisticated over the last 5 years and much more affordable. In part driven by the cloud, but you're also seeing a number of open source offerings that are quite robust, right? And to be frank, they're coming out of the big data munging companies like Meta or Google. Those are the foundations for those models, and then they've been commercialized to make them accessible across the data market in general. But I think those tools are gonna see more adoption. I say this in part to then say this, I don't think any tool out there solves the conformance problem, right? That is always gonna involve the business giving guidance and making decisions and telling the technical side of the house what's important and how they want to see that data. Does that kind of answer your question?
I have another question. Go ahead. I mean, yes and no, but go ahead.
So I just wanted to hear your perspective on the multi-tenant versus single-tenant trends in SaaS offerings on cloud. Because many organizations have security concerns on a multi-tenant offerings. So what are the trends?
Well played. So Molecule itself is actually multi-tenant. And I think there are always organizations who are gonna have concerns about that. I think we're a great case in point because we've proven that commodity trading organizations are able to leverage that multi-tenancy to their advantage. And what's the advantage? The advantage is I'm not managing multiple branches for you and your competitor and whatever customer I have out there. I have uniformity of deployment. Therefore, the advantage that I see in multi-tenancy is speed of releasing new features and commonality of features to the broader market. And you honed in on the challenge of multi-tenancy, right? It's around access, security, and data leakage. We handle that with physical and logical data models, and you got to be rigorous. You got to test, and we have very, very rigorous testing to ensure that we're not having any data contamination when we do a release. We make a release at Molecule, for example, at least every 4 weeks, sometimes more quickly. So we're very agile, very containerized, and we're able to move out new features quickly, but we always go through rigorous testing. Security is the only answer to that. And I wish I could tell you it was foolproof, but I also appreciate that there are some organizations out there that will never be comfortable with multi-tenancy.
I'll add something about the cloud. I think when you look at the cloud, one thing it did is, like I said, it allowed, you don't have to manage the physical infrastructure. So in that sense, not very much different than it doesn't really bring anything new. Like you used to have data centers, it's just the computers. Right now, it's on the Amazon's data centers. So there's no difference. The main difference is with the cloud, now the vendors, some of the vendors become actually the operators of the systems as well, right? So you can actually buy a service. Previously, you buy the maybe software from a vendor, you buy the hardware, you have to deploy, you need the people who knows how to deploy it and run it. maintain that software. It might be like a, regular security patches. Database might be full. You need to take a backup. So there's a lot of operations involved in actually using a system. So now with what cloud does is like you could just get all of that as a kind of a service. You just use it. You don't really care about how this thing gonna scale or how does the storage, the backups are done, how the security is done. So you literally kind of focus on what you need out of the software. I think that's especially for the small, medium organization, that's a great service, because then you just basically pay the subscription fee and then you use that service. You don't have to worry about how these things work and get all the people to can manage that. Obviously for bigger organizations, things might be a bit different, but even them, for certain systems, if it's not their core systems, they prefer to use that approach.
If that's preventing you from having a further conversation with Molecule for the right price, we're happy to do single tenancy for you.
By the way, Dennis, thank you for using the word data munging. I really love that phrase. It's data munging. One final question we have time for. Oh, we'll do the audience then. There you go.
So I totally agree that typical SaaS or proper multi-tenant SaaS platforms add the value of uniformity of the actual single branch, but that's really more of a single branch function. That the classic on-prem or single tenant cloud or PaaS or whatever you want to call that. Yeah. And I'm from Ion, so I get many different types of deployment platforms. But that's not a SaaS benefit, that's a single branch benefit. So my question is, for a VP who, I can remember back in like the early 2000s, some of the data warehouse projects that were going on out here. The amount of money that's able to be spent on that is massive, and for large companies. What's being done right now for a small company, a 5-person trading shop that also needs a data solution? How do they do that?
So I think they have a couple of options. One, they can certainly take advantage of some of the popular cloud offerings that are out there. And again, at the risk of plugging my own company, we're rolling out a feature that's a curated data fabric for that very reason. And that is single tenancy. It allows reporting and analytics. And it's been really driven by the request and demand from our customers that they have other data outside of our ETRM that they want to put together in a sensible way so that they can run more sophisticated analytics and reporting, right? They want to bring in market data, they want to bring in mid-office data, they want to do a little more regulatory insight and reporting, and they don't have the IT infrastructure, they don't have the breadth of staff to build that on their own. So our offering says, hey, if you're on Molecule, we'll bring all your trading data into that, all your ETRM data that you can report on in any way you want, plus we'll allow you to bring in other data from your environment or the market that you have license to, and we will curate your data model. We will push that semantic layer out, we will manage it and maintain it over time, so that you as a smaller company don't have to worry about everything behind your data model, right? We'll do our very best to bring together all that data, and obviously it requires work with the company, but we're doing all that heavy lifting, and once it's there, we manage that over time and free that company of 5 people or 10 people or whatever the case is to run the analytics. And they can use our tools to do the analytics, or we're entirely agnostic at that point. So that's one solution. I think the other solution is to be rapid, do rapid development and experimentation in the cloud. Again, it's brought the cost down effectively, and there are plenty of tools that you can tap into with a bit of technical know-how, right? I think the other thing that's interesting in general is that we are kind of seeing that democratization of tools. right, that are going to demystify some of the technical back end and really enable kind of the citizen developer, if you will.
So I know the armadillo is waiting for everybody, and the margaritas, but I'll leave you with, my one comment on this is that essentially there's just no one-size-fits-all solution, right? And as a vendor in this space, we've got SaaS clients, we've got on-prem clients, we've got combinations, right? But that's still that hybrid. I thought I was going to have to stop using the word hybrid 6 years ago when the initial rollout of cloud started. But it's going to be there for a while because there's parts of the data model that our tier 1 clients do not want to expose to the cloud. So we've got to be able to interoperate with that data seamlessly. Right? Our SaaS platform, our cloud-based solution needs to be able to access that data safely, securely, encrypted, stored in memory, perform the analytics on it, and delete the data. Those kind of things. That one-size-fits-all solution just doesn't exist. It's all about being flexible, solve the problems that our clients have, and not try to solve it for them. Right? Not give them only one option, but be flexible.
Great. Just to be fair, Chet, do you have any last words here as well, or?
No, I mean, it's great to use in a SaaS solution. I think the only thing I would add is there's could be like a vendor lock-in problem. So I think the industry should address that by having open data standards. So you're not at the mercy of one vendor, not just because of the potential malice, but they might go out of business, for example. Right? There might be some business implications which are out of your control. But if you have like an open data standards, then at least you can move your data from one platform to another, because data is going to be your most valuable asset. You put all your curation, all your kind of a business operation data there, and then suddenly that vendor out of business, and what are you going to do? So you need to be able to move your business to some other vendor. As long as that's the case, then just choose whatever offering is kind of best suits your needs.
Wonderful. Well, with that, we're going to say thank you to Dennis, to Scott, and Chetan. Thank you very much.